Today I'm really excited for us to discuss this paper of Tati Steelman and team on the work up in Canada with Indigenous communities and transdisciplinary research. Before we get into that today, we're going to do a couple of things. One, Barb Cousins, who's one of our PAC leaders, is going to be forecasting for us some of the work we're going to be doing moving forward, and she's got some things for us to be thinking about as we think about the next couple of sessions that we have coming on together. And then, in addition to that, I'm just going to do a brief kind of review of where we've been so far with the transdisciplinary discussion. So I'm going to hand it over to Barb for getting us started with thinking about the next couple of webinars. Barb?
Great, thank you. Well, I know everybody probably had a really long night last night, and that may account for not as many people on. But what I want to do is set up some background to help us have productive dialogues in the next the November 18th and December 2nd sessions. And what my role in this webinar is to help you set up the next step to a productive collaboration. And so what I've been doing in the past sessions is taking notes on sort of what you express as your research and education interests, and as well as what's expressed as needs from within the basin. And then sort of fitting those into categories for the breakouts. And what I want to do today is tell you enough that you can respond to some questions that are going to come out in a survey, be a short survey, only 2 questions, but they're going to help me organize you into breakout rooms for the December 2nd gathering, and also to understand more specifically what opportunities and challenges participating in this collaborative presents to you, to see if we can help you address some of those. So I wanted to start by saying a couple of things about transdisciplinary research and convergence, to emphasize how important the steps you're taking are, and maybe to help you think about which of the breakouts you want to choose on the survey. And then I'm going to briefly go through what's going to be on the survey, just so you can ask questions if you need to right now. So you've spent some time on this already. Transdisciplinary research involves the co-production of both the questions you want to explore and the knowledge that you generate by exploring those questions. And it's the co-production between researchers and those who might be affected by or even benefit from the research. And so in your case, it's a collaborative effort among agency, NGO, and academics that have been participating in this group. It could also involve communities in the basin and might draw on local and indigenous knowledge, as you'll be discussing today. And I just wanted to say one thing about why it's so critical, and it's really exciting to see this many people interested in it. I think we're realizing that transdisciplinary research is critical when these social ecological systems like the Rio Grande are facing problems beyond what they've faced in the past, and that sort of lie at the cutting edge of scientific understanding. So when you think of the current accelerating change we face globally, and that you've all described in the Rio Grande, it displays this attribute of accelerating change. And it's also important when this type of accelerating change is influencing a complex system like the Rio Grande, because those types of systems exhibit emergent behavior that's contextual. And our usual academic approach is to generate generalizable and transferable knowledge, and that may fall short. We may find that local knowledge identifies emergent behavior before we can predict it, but once it's observed, the academics may be better situated to determine its cause. And that's probably reason in itself to co-produce knowledge. But I also want to say a little bit about convergence, because that's what you're going to be looking at in the next session on November 18th. And I kind of wanted to draw that thread between today, next time, and the last time that we all meet. Convergence research, I don't know if it's new to you, but it's a new one for me that I just learned about from Mindy. And you'll learn more about it in preparation and during the next webinar. But to the extent I understand it from last night's quick reading on it, it sounds like people have used it to describe sort of two phenomena in research. I think both are relevant to the work you're doing, and both are relevant in times of accelerating change. So the first one is it kind of focuses on those times of accelerating change in some aspects of human systems in which both society and the academy are pursuing answers to the same questions. So you can kind of think of it as, due to this acceleration in change, that the long view we try to take in academic research has become the same as the short-term view of society. And that overlaps with reasons for doing transdisciplinary research. And the second one is more of importance maybe in the academy itself, and that is that it captures the identification of similar phenomena or system attributes from entirely different disciplines. They may be converging on ideas of causation, methodology, the type of data used, or interpretation. And in my own work, I've found when I observe those phenomena, it's really powerful. And I tell my students, if you observe different disciplines converging on similar phenomena or similar interpretations, pay attention, because this is where opportunities for major advancement lie. We'll have a chance to talk about this more, but for now, I just wanted to set up why the path you're taking is so important. It's not the same as what we've always called applied research or extension research. This is cutting edge research within a complex system to solve real problems that communities are facing. So to organize the last session, I'm going to ask you to fill out a survey, and it'll go out hopefully by the end of this week, or if not, the beginning of next week. And I'm asking you to complete it by close of business on Friday the 13th. I know I was shocked to find that we had both an election and a Friday at the 13th in the same month. It's just going to be 2 questions. The first question will identify 3 areas of research and 1 area of education, and you're going to pick one to participate in a breakout session. Understand that that doesn't preclude you from participating in the others as this work goes forward. It's just an opportunity to identify with one to help brainstorm and develop next steps. So I wanted to briefly go through those 4 areas so you have a preview of it and a chance to ask me questions before you get the survey. The first one is kind of a high level one that sort of lends itself to some of the types of calls for proposals that are coming out of NSF. And it's to understand how we can do the co-production of knowledge or transdisciplinary research better. So it's to address some of the problems that many of you have identified in your discussions. How do we move from sort of the one-off approach that tends to fatigue stakeholders and make them reluctant to participate and mostly results in publications but not on-the-ground benefits? And how do we in the long term educate students to do this kind of work? It's basically the question of the day that's being asked in higher ed. How do we make higher ed and research more relevant in our times? You'll only be asked to think about that in the context of the Rio Grande. The survey will have some examples of the type of research questions that fall in this area. I think it'd be really great if someone from the non-academic participants joined that group, particularly on the question of relevance, but I also understand that that's a category that doesn't necessarily provide short-term benefits for a non-academic entity. The second one I'm calling co-production of knowledge, and from the conversations you've had so far, I would expect this to be the primary area you identify. Most of you will be in this group. And don't worry that you work at different scales. I've heard that mentioned. That'll be one of the topics of the breakout. But you should identify this area if you feel you're interested in developing collaborative research in which the research questions and the exploration of those questions are done collaboratively among researchers and non-academics, including maybe agency staff, NGO staff, and community members. The third area I'm calling stakeholder responsive research. You may identify this area either because you have limitations in time or funding, or the metrics that your department or agency evaluates you based on, but you're still here because you want to do research that's relevant to the problems faced in the Rio Grande. This is the group that would be discussing the idea that's come forward of developing a virtual bulletin board for posting of agency, NGO, community research needs, and matching those with researchers at the University of New Mexico. And you'll see in the survey that I'm asking people that sign up for that group to kind of research how that's already being done at the university and how people in the community are reaching out to researchers. It may be that you can leverage some opportunities that are already there. The fourth group falls into education. Some of you have expressed the need for a pipeline from rural communities to the university and back again. In some of the work I've done, we call this K through Gray education. This group will be asked to bring their knowledge or to do some research on existing pipeline programs at the university and identify steps either to work within those, or if they're not adequate, seek development of a new one. As we're seeing from the results of yesterday, our rural communities are hurting nationwide. And this group would be thinking not only about the education, but how it might link to the co-production of knowledge, and be brainstorming on how you can recruit students into that work so they're working on research that benefits the communities they care about and are prepared to go back into those communities to work. You could be exploring ideas of scholarships awarded on the condition that students return to placements in the basin. If you're a non-academic, you could be bringing ideas on internships and job placements for those students. And so there are many of opportunities within that group. The descriptions of each of the 4 categories will be in this survey. The second question I'm going to ask you in the survey is one where you'll actually write a comment, not just choose a multiple choice. And I want you to think very carefully about it and maybe even talk to your colleagues and supervisors to be able to answer, because it's really important for collaboration going forward. And that is, what do you need to get out of this collaboration to make it worth your while to participate? And do you face any barriers? For those of you that are academics, that may be you need publications or funding. Your publications might need to be within a certain discipline and can't be interdisciplinary. What barriers do you have there? What do you need to be able to attract students? For agency and NGO, what kind of help do you need to be able to demonstrate you get on problems you're facing in order to justify your time spent? And what does it mean for you for that help to be timely? We've often, in collaborations between academic and non-academic, have a disconnect in the timescales that we work on. And so we're going to want to have a little bit of discussion about that. And I want to know your thoughts on that before we go into the final meeting. What are your concerns also with limits on your time? We're all spread very thin. And yet this is a really exciting opportunity, but collaborative work does take time. I think we might have time, Mindy, let me know if we don't, for 1 or 2 questions, but either way, feel free to email me with questions about what we're going to do in the last session and about the 4 areas of breakout, or about challenges that you face, or if you want to post those questions on Slack, that would be fine too. I'll turn it back to you, Mindy.
Yeah, questions for Barb? Go ahead and just shout out if you do. I don't hear any immediately, so I would just say, look, please look forward to that survey heading your way, and we will be obviously looking forward to the results, and especially think that that question of what do you need to get out of it is a good one. I remember Barb asking me that at the beginning of the collaborative that she led, that I was a part of, regarding 5 large water basins. And I told her, and she delivered, baby. You know, I got a lot of great work out of that I needed as a then assistant professor, going through tenure and promotion. It was a wonderful experience and a lot of working relationships that I still have to this day. So it's an important question to ask. So and all those important questions for this collaborative. So anyway, with that, I think let's turn to, I'm going to share my screen so that we can just look at this. Do desktop 2, put this in presentation mode. I'm going to share. And then I put this in presentation mode. Going to move us pretty quickly into discussion about this paper, and we're small enough, hopefully we can have some really great discussion. Just as a brief review, here's where we were last time. We talked very generally about transdisciplinary research, and actually Barb already kind of gave us that initial kind of review about these kind of 3 kind of interesting kind of qualities associated with them. And the nature in which it really is kind of a co-production and co-design with opportunities for thinking very differently about the academy as contextualizing our own knowledge, production of knowledge, as particularly apropos in this paper. A little bit of a contrast from our last paper. So in our last paper, and this is a figure from the last paper, the last paper presented what Steelman and her colleagues in this paper call Mode 2 research. Think of Mode 2 in the same way in which the biospherians referred to biosphere as Biosphere 2, with us living in Biosphere 1. So Mode 1 research is the traditional sort of disciplinary-based science research, and Mode 2 research is something that's also sometimes called post-normal science, or something that is more of a co-production of knowledge and, in terms of the co-design of research and definition of problems and of solutions. Yet this school that we're looking at today, which is called the Nicholasolian School, I guess, is taking a more metaphysical and one would say more radical approach to thinking about research. They critique this model as precluding other types of more subjective human experience, including intuition, relationships, spirituality, and also critiquing this model for privileging human science and Western knowledge production as a predominant way of knowing. And so this particular paper is often, another way of discussing it is often sometimes called the hidden third, a place in which the subjective and the objective kind of come together under an umbrella of meaning. Another way of thinking about this that I kind of like is, what if you took quantum physics seriously and tried to create a research methodology around it? So in which the observer influences the observed, in which there is an ongoing relationality associated with it. And so Steelman and her colleagues sort of explore what this looks like within the context of working with Indigenous communities, recognizing that relational ontologies are often very present within Indigenous cultures, and in this case, First Nations in Canada. And so this is a figure from the Steelman paper that sort of talks about the different worldviews and the ways in which there's an effort to create unfiltered and safe space. And the real take home from this paper that they provide is the ways in which they've used art as a boundary object to create some safe spaces for a transdisciplinary safe space. And these are the 5 characteristics of those spaces. And I think it would be fun to sort of get into groups and talk about these characteristics, just basic things that came up for you in the paper. I know a lot of you on the call work with Native communities, both in New Mexico and elsewhere. I'm going to take these characteristics, actually, I'm going to go ahead and throw them in the chat, but you don't necessarily have to chat about them. You can chat about whatever it is that you want. And how are we doing on time? We've got we're not doing great on time, but you know, that's just life these days. So what we're going to do is we still have, I think, maybe 15 minutes for breakout groups, 15 to 16 minutes for breakout groups, and then 15 to 16 minutes to talk as a larger group and see what kind of common themes this particular type of transdisciplinary research might have to offer our collaborative in the Rio Grande. And then the thinking is, based on that, what we could potentially do is, you know, then also contrast that with the other methodology and maybe even generate some thoughts regarding where we would take it. So if that sounds good to everyone, then what I'd like to do is go ahead and start putting people into those breakouts. I see a few people are kind of letting me know that they're going to have to be dropping off. That's okay. Darn it. Sorry to leave some people. You can, I think I'm okay. I can handle the breakout groups, but don't worry, I can handle it. So I'm going to create, we've got 13 people. I'm going to create 3 breakout groups, and we're going to do it for 15 minutes or so. And I think I've got some ability to do some time. Yeah. Okay. Go. I'll see you soon.
2015. Well, we made it back.
I think people get like 60 seconds or something. I don't know. Yeah, we still get a little bit of time.
It's an odd day too. It's just such
But for what it's worth, in northern New Mexico, every fall they have an art crawl, and it's like 150 miles. It's like you go to all those little towns in northern New Mexico, and they all have their art galleries up through Cuesta and Taos and Dixon and up in there. And each little community has their art stuff, and so that in some other year we could do that.
Yeah, you know, and I actually invited a couple of the different artists on campus to attend, but we didn't get any. There are a few artists that I think could be good members of our collaborative. But okay, how's everyone doing? How's our team? We're down to 11. Boy, now we find out who's got game. All right. So, what did you guys end up chatting about? I'm curious to hear people's thoughts. Dasha, let's hear from you.
Sorry.
Let's hear from you.
For me. Oh, well, our group talked about mainly about communication, different ways that we can use art in our communication, the ways that we think about when we talk about conveying science information to those who might use it, members of our community. We think about it as simplifying, but really we were discussing it as a way of complexifying it actually, which is sort of toning down the overemphasis on the science part and starting to incorporate the different parts of the human experience, including the artistic expression, different ways of communicating, storytelling, those kinds of things. Yeah, the ways that can, just that switch from thinking that we're dumbing it down to actually thinking that we're making it more complex allows us to incorporate those different pieces. And Barb had a great example with the Indigenous community up north that maybe she'll say something about.
Is that my cue?
That's your cue.
Yeah, we had a great conversation, and I was telling them that I'm on a committee of a graduate student who's working on the Coeur d'Alene Reservation, who's looking at the use of photography with Native youth who are about the junior high school age, and taking, Western science classes in school that describe the contamination of the lake their reservation is on and those types of things, and trying to use photography to have them talk about it from a view that captures their own Native identity. So they take the pictures, they describe what places mean to them, and then they have discussions about how that relates to the Western science and how that affects them. And she's just in the early stages, but I think it'll be really interesting to see where she goes with that. But I also mentioned something that goes to working with Indigenous communities. She really did a long process of developing the relationships to be able to be accepted, both by the tribal community, but also by the youth. And that probably took a year. So just to be aware of what you have to invest if you really want to do that kind of work.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that attracted me about this paper, and also about just this methodology in general, is that, we do have in our watershed, we do have a number of public communities that, and Native and reservation-based nations that we are already working with as a part of this, these efforts. And I think that for the most part, what we do is just plug them into our Western scientific models and our agency models and our, please participate in our XYZ process. This federal grant's available here, this, that, the other, there's a lot of that going on. And I think that, it's not to say that those things shouldn't be occurring. I think that, the Western dominant paradigm is not going anywhere anytime soon. At the same time, there's a loss of richness when we fail to contextualize the Western dominant paradigm. And I'm particularly interested in doing that myself, and looking at the limitations of that paradigm and thinking about if we can open our perceptions up to different ontologies, how can we perceive reality, and in what ways can we perceive reality potentially more accurately about these complex systems, in ways that open up better ways of perceiving management opportunities, So I think that that's part of what intrigues me about this type of transdisciplinarity. If we could really pull off a way of embracing the subjectivities and objectivities and inter-objectivities as well as intersubjectivities of research. That's what I think is.
Inner or inter?
I said inter.
Inter, between. Yeah.
Inner, although intra would also work, because I think within each of ourselves, we also have those same subjectivities.
Yeah, no, that's why I was asking the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, Melinda, you asked me a question. I was really I think I'm slow and processing. I think I'm starting to come up with some ideas to the question you asked me like 15 minutes ago. But one of the things I see, I'm thinking about like how does this sort of approach that's like fit within, you know, the discipline of political science. And one of the things I've really struggled with in my field research, and it comes from lack of time. Like I don't have a lot of time to be able to go collect a lot of data and interact with people. But another issue is just like that entry moment of trying to establish a working relationship. It often feels very much like, hi, I'm Jamie. I have a bunch of questions for you. And I'd like you to tell me everything within this specific framework that I'm shoving on you in this moment. I mean, it's, you know, there are times where it just feels so abrupt. And I do think that like this other angle of like developing artwork or trying to come up with some sort of different, like not forcing people to sort of engage directly in having to respond to answers that are predetermined, but giving this moment for people to sort of step back and shift into some other sort of medium. I could see where this could be helpful, and at least it helps establish a working relationship so that the very first interaction is not just a, hey, I've got a survey for you, or I've got like 20 different questions if you've got an hour to talk to me. So anyway, a delayed comment, but I can see some response. Something's happening.
Can I speak to that from something that was discussed in our group? And this was, Laura brought this up. So Laura, if I stated incorrectly, jump in. But that one of the things that had struck her about the article was that it wasn't just using art for communicating ideas, but for asking people what was important to them about the watershed. And I think where it might be something, one of the many messages you could take from this article is think about, you know, always think of, oh, the co-production of knowledge is we go develop research questions together with people in the basin. Well, you know, how many people are you going to be working with in the basin that think in terms of research questions? But if you started, depending on the group, from a different place and say, you know, let's use these artists to draw your view or your hopes for this basin, or how it affected you when the fire came through, or whatever it is that's getting at what you're trying to asking. I guess I just encourage you to be creative about that first step of co-production, of developing the questions. You can then translate them into research questions.
Exactly. There's lots of ways to produce knowledge. Like Nina Elder, who actually lives in our community, she's an artist working with fire threatened and communities in the Sierra Nevada. And one thing she's doing with those communities is helping them think through the changes that they either have experienced or are going to experience. And one thing she's doing with landowners is helping them create time capsules of their land to kind of capture and commemorate what their land has been to them, to think about, to make the meaning and the memories, and knowing that the acceleration is here, knowing that the change is coming. And I just think about that as a great example of where, like, think of the knowledge that's being produced in the process of being basically I referred to her as a hospice worker, basically, you know, for a fire shed. You know, she's helping people grieve their landscape, you know, as they're in the process of losing their lands to fire, and helping them think through what that land has meant to them and what the community has meant to them. And there's a lot of knowledge being produced in that process. And she's actually working with academics. I don't know what they're planning to produce out of that, but I sent her the paper, tried to get her on the call today, but she's probably on her studio producing something beautiful or something. But I put a link to her work last week in the chat. her work is pretty amazing. So yeah, it is tantalizing, and we do have living. I think part of the answer too is these relationships take place. They're ongoing relationships. They take place over time. Many of us have those relationships already in the basin. But another answer to them is also empowering our students, that are students who are from these communities, who live in these communities and plan to go back and work and want to have living wage jobs, working and caring about these communities with jobs in natural resources, helping them to do that work as well. And so, one potential target for this group would be to think about how to target an NRT or an REU or something, that would allow us to work with students from communities in the basin, to do work related to the basin, that would, and that would be that would kind of create a feedback loop, into that, into investing in the community. That would be not so much like a researcher going back and extracting knowledge. I mean, this is the extractive, something Jamie and I talked about in another context of this kind of, one of the things that this paper also kind of gets at is this nature in which there's this academic extractivism of, communities coming in and just extracting knowledge from communities and then producing academic papers, from having taken out data and information. And like, oh, we'll come back and give a workshop based on what we found. It's like, is that really what we're doing? Is that really it's like, no, we want to do better than that. We want to be like acknowledging the value of the knowledge that's there, working with them to work on what's important to people who are there, and have a non-extractive relationship with communities, and actually be helping to build resilience of these communities, and helping to like be good partners, and good, be what a university should be, to the members of its state, basically, is in my mind one way of thinking about it. I don't know. That was kind of a rant. Sorry. Mark, you joined us late. Thoughts?
And you look exhausted.
I am exhausted beyond belief.
I see that.
This is quite the boys' club, huh?
Yeah, you're like the Robert. Todd was here for a while. Todd Kaplan. We called him the Robert Palmer of the group. Now you're the Robert Palmer.
Oh. I'm always filling in for Kaplan, but no, it's really nice dialogue. Sorry, I just got on late. I was on another call for our proposal with our Indigenous partners, having some very similar discussions. So this is good stuff.
From that you can convey to us as like a closing remark?
Not at this moment.
Okay, you're exhausted. I can see that.
There were a lot of the same types of issues, though. Like, we're trying to come into the discussions there without an extractive mentality, and try to really respect Indigenous knowledge and think about protecting Indigenous knowledge while still illuminating so how much we can learn from it. So it's a fascinating balancing act.
Yeah.
Oh, I just have to say, I put in the chat the link for the OVPR search. The candidate who's here now, she worked at NSF in the endangered language programs, and she was talking about all the ways you build connections with Indigenous communities and how much time it takes. And so you might want to check her out. I'm just saying.
I'll put it in the chat again so that Mark has it, because you know how it goes. If you come in late, you don't get the chat link.
Right. When is her presentation?
Tomorrow.
She's got another open forum tomorrow, and I assume they are recording them. I assume they'll be on the website, but you can ask questions if you can actually attend it. And she's a linguistics person.
Nice.
Fascinating stuff.
Do you know what her endangered language specialty is? We should look at her CV.
Yeah, look at her CV. She worked with several different endangered languages, but I can't remember.
Okay.
It's
And
an
I have
impressive
to
list.
go.
Yeah, we're out of time, but you guys are the hardcore. You get special gold stars next to your Slack names. Rock stars.
So do you, Mindy.
Bye, hang in there.
Hang in there.
I love. Bye.
Hi, love. How are you? You hanging?
I'm pretty tired too. Yeah.
Did you stay up late last night?
Yeah. I'll talk to you in a non-recorded line sometime soon.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Bye, darling.